I'm glad so many of you are here. So just the regular notice, we will be recording. Oh, thank you, Josh, for actually remembering to hit the record button.
Not
So
me,
if
but
you
thank you,
do,
someone.
uh, thank you, somebody, probably Joy. So we will be recording. So if you do not want yourself to be on the recording, you can turn your camera off. If you don't care, you can leave it on. Please turn your mics off if you're not speaking. And notice that anything you say and type into the chat is public record. So just be mindful of that. We want to remind you of that. So let's see if we have Jason here yet. Tom is here. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat your name and what your library is. Well, we have your name, but just put your library in too. That would be great. That way we know where you're coming from. And welcome. So while we wait for Jason to hop in, Tom, do you want to go first on your broadband update? So the way this is going, we'll have Jason give his update, legislative, other updates, Tom, which we're going to move while we're waiting for Jason. Then all of the units are going to give their individual updates, and we're going to leave plenty of time for you all to ask your questions. But please go ahead and put your questions in the chat as they come up in your mind, and we'll address them either as we go along or we'll save them for the end. So, so Tom, are you prepared to speak?
Sure, I'm happy to hop in.
Okay,
Pick
thanks.
this up. Let's get started. I know that many of you have been paying attention. Perhaps all of you have been paying attention, but there's a lot of discussion right now, both at the local, state, and federal levels about broadband. So what is broadband? I think most of us know that, but if you don't, that's fine. So the broadband would be fiber optic, and fiber optic is cables that are made of glass fibers, which allows the data to move at the speed of light, and so you get less slowdown than you would with copper cables. It's very difficult to approach high speeds through copper cables. So fiber optic was a really important step in terms of being able to transmit information over lines at a high speed. So that's what we're talking about when we say broadband. So what that means is fiber, essentially. That's often the shorthand for what we're talking about. So there's a lot of movement on this. Peter Welch has certainly been a champion for trying to get broadband to every corner of Vermont. And if you think about, I live in a house that's from the early 19th century, and we have light fixtures that are about 100 years old. We have light switches in the middle of the wall, which tells me that these were installed probably, again, about maybe 90 years ago as part of the rural electrification effort in Vermont. And so that was essentially the same as what we're seeing with broadband. Basically, that those people who live in the city, towns and cities, generally speaking, can get high-speed internet, whereas people kind of out of town, they didn't have electricity until the 1930s, and with the rural electric co-ops, and so we're seeing that with broadband, that it's harder to get it outside of town. There are some efforts being made to correct this. There's communication union districts. You might see CUD or CUDs for short in different conversations. Those communication union districts, I believe there's 9. Josh, you can correct me if I don't quite have that number right. But what they are is they're regional districts that are very similar to the rural electric co-ops that, again, these parallels are really interesting with rural electrification. So these communication union districts are trying to build these fiber optic networks in given areas. Disclaimer here, I'm an alternate for East Montpelier on the CV Fiber Board, which is Central Vermont Fiber. There is one communication union district, EC Fiber, that already has customers, and they have had customers for a couple of years, and so they're starting to build that. I'm sorry, I might be a little too deep into this to give a real good description, so please let me know if you have questions. Sometimes if you're really familiar with something, you glaze over important details. So trying not to do that here. So with communication union districts, this is an effort that is really grassroots. It's volunteer groups, and it's a really interesting way of doing this, and I think probably the most successful way to do it. But before I get into that, let's talk a little bit about Starlink, which is the Tesla effort to create essentially a worldwide high-speed network using satellites. Apparently there are people in Vermont that have already subscribed to this. I know that they got almost $900 million from the FCC back in December. So there is some public money going into this. So my question is, not to be biased here, but if public money is going into this, why are the startup costs so high? The initial cost is $500 to get the equipment, and then $99 a month. So immediately, I know what many of us are thinking. This is going to leave many people on the wrong side of the digital divide. $99 a month is a lot more than you would typically expect to pay. This is rapidly moving. They have, I think, about 1,000 satellites up, but they want to put up another 5,000. The speed that you can get on Starlink is not as fast as broadband, but it's faster than anything else that most people can get that's not broadband. So and think about the possibilities there. If you were in, basically it doesn't matter where you are. You can be in one of the gores in the Northeast Kingdom. You can be in the Serengeti. You can be in the Himalayas, and you could get these signals. So it's pretty extraordinary to be able to think of having that network all over the world. But again, I think that as librarians, we understand who's going to get left on the wrong side of that digital divide. So it's fast, but it's not as fast. There's some talk about creating a department in state government to oversee broadband, which I think would be a good idea. Right now, a lot of that is handled through the public service department. So it could be a good way to centralize those efforts, kind of have a clearinghouse and a single management point for that stuff. So we'll see what develops with that. And of course, the Department of Libraries still manages the Fiber Connect network. I know that some of you are on that network. So there's 40 libraries that are on that network, and we do still manage that. So there's some possible tie-ins if there was a state department created for that. That management of Fiber Connect may be shifted. It's really super early to say now, but that kind of leads me into my last bit about broadband, which is some predictions about what I think will happen over the next few years. I believe that the communication union districts are the best solution for Vermont. It's a proven model. There's already customers. I think that there's a feeling, certainly within parts of state government, that agrees with that. I also believe that through those communication union districts, these will grow over the next several years. I would guess that probably half of the state will have broadband through those CUDs within 3 to 5 years. So it's not that far out. In the meantime, Starlink, I believe, will grow. And there's some discussion possibly about there being subsidies to help people get on Starlink that maybe won't be part of those CUDs or have CUDs that are not moving as quickly. So we'll see. I mean, these are all predictions, and we don't know exactly what will happen, but that's kind of my view on that. So sort of a brief summary, well, kind of brief, thank you, of broadband in the state of Vermont.
Thanks, Tom. And there aren't any questions in the chat right now about that, but do post them. I put a link to the CUD information up, as well as 2 articles on Starlink, one VPR and one in 7 days, that came up this week. And I think we have Jason in the room now. Jason, are you there and ready for your update?
Yes, good morning. I do have to apologize. I ended up being ready, and one of those wonderful things happened to you in which you received a phone call at the very time you need to speak, and this one was from a 12-year-old person. in our state who was asking questions about a writing contest. And the teacher just said, well, just call the state librarian. And so I decided to discuss the contest with one of our youngest Vermonters and what that actually means. So I am sorry for being late, but I am now here. So thank you for coming this morning to hear some of the interesting updates and items that are going on nationally and statewide. And so my role today is to kind of discuss what we are seeing and just make you aware of information that you might not have exactly known about or at least heard a little bit about. And I'll try to make my time brief because there's quite a lot of others behind me who have updates and information to give to you as well. So we're going to start off first with the state items in the legislature. There are a variety of bills that we actually have but on different items, there is one that will be very specific to more people for interest and the others are just for awareness. So we are working on some of our administrative housekeeping changes that really impacts Tom's area because we distribute and also coordinate receipt of what is known as the Vermont statutes. And people just call them the green books. So we have a lot of those that need to go out to a variety of entities, including into your own local communities, so that they are updated each year. When the legislature passes items or changes and adjusts things, believe it or not, there's a printing house that does this. They come to us and then we distribute that out to a variety of people per statute and also by request. Why is that unique? Well, once we moved from Montpelier to Barre, we lost a lot of space. And what you might not know is parts of the statutes since the founding of the library, and in some cases the founding of the state, require us to have 100 copies of a certain type of thing. And unless the taxpayers of Vermont would like to fund a brand new library to house 100 copies of government information, that's going to be a little bit exorbitant on us. So we are working to adjust it to a more appropriate number because it also impacts the work and role of archives as well. So that is what we're working on together. Those were just discussed last week, and Tom took lead on that during testimony, and myself and the state archivist were there to add commentary on why we would like to have this supported and passed, which we believe it will be. We also have the Department of Libraries budget. We are again secure to move forward in the state with our budget, and within that we had a lot of accolades with some of the internal fiscal protocols that we have now mastered. For a while we were not exactly doing some things the way the state exactly wanted them to be done, and so within that we have had our audit and we did extremely well. In some cases we have surpassed the state on some of our fiscal processes through that review. That is also an internal control item with the Department of Finance that we must do each year on how we deal with invoices, grants, rollout, oversight, and connection. And so we are very pleased that we had a lot of above averages for our budget. I was told that when we have our budget hearings, and it is recorded, it is very rare to hear budget people actually say, you have a fan club here, we love what you're doing with money and how you do this. So that was kind of funny if you were able to watch the testimony that was provided. So another positive. The one that everybody is really more interested in is probably going to be a specific bill that we were introducing last year that unfortunately got hung up and stopped because of COVID. And so within this, it is S26. Thank you, Jeanette, for putting that in. And it's the Working Group Library Study Bill. So it has been updated. This has been introduced by Senator Harney, and it will allow you to see the reformatted one that will be introduced this year. There have been some changes in committee assignments in a variety of ways, so people have been switched. Normally this would have been going to the chair at that time, would have been Senator Baruch. Over Senate Education is who we reside under when we are dealing with things with senators. And so within that, we now have Senator Campion, who is leading the actual item. The bill, of course, is more inclusive to me of libraries. The last bill had a variety of people who wanted to be on it, such as state senators and policy people, and that was going to be a bit interesting for us. But to give you the highlights, at the current moment, the working group still would do a variety of things to take a survey of the entire library landscape, which has probably not been done, they said, for about 50 to 60 years, was the last official report to say, how are libraries in this state doing of all caliber? The reason a study to me is needed is we do need to assess how we are working with libraries as the Department of Libraries, and also what the needs are across the state. There are updates to the actual bill where we would be now able to look at pre-COVID data and information, current, and then possible future. The reason why that is in there, per my asking, is because the state and the country are going through things that a lot of money might be coming out where some of this might be addressed. As Tom has said, broadband is on everybody's mind. So we do have that in the bill, but we might not need to look at that in the way that we wanted to look at it if all of a sudden the federal government starts helping states address broadband within their states. So that would kind of gently exit out a little bit, but try to make sure that libraries are considered, in my purview, one of the best places to have as a center for their community and for the town. So in my case, I would love for libraries to be specifically, if possible, retrofitted where they are the actual hub. So if the town lost electricity or whatever else, the library would be that one thing that is up and running where people can actually run to for a variety of reasons, including if the town itself said, okay, we are under emergency power, we can use the library if possible from time to time to conduct some business. But that again is a futuristic thought. The layout for the membership on the committee is State Librarian, President of the Vermont Library Association or designee, the Executive Director of Humanities, 3 representatives of public libraries who shall be from different size libraries and different regions of the state, appointed by the State Librarian, 2 representatives from public school libraries, again, different sizes, different geography, appointed by the Secretary of Education, 2 representatives from college and university libraries appointed by the College and Special Library Section of Vermont Library Association, and 1 public library trustee appointed by the president of the Friends and Trustee actual group. We had a wonderful conversation with lots of questions. We did have a unique surprise person to also testify. In the testimony, we had the chair of the State Board of Libraries, who has been on this from the inception with Senator Hardy, myself, Tom, and Jeanette. And then we also had the Dean of Vermont's Libraries, Mr. Brin, actually give testimony in support of this actual bill, along with a few questions about how university systems can be more helpful in connecting with libraries, and a specific question on how can the UVM library system be of use in helping libraries across the state. So those will also have to be addressed, followed by, he wanted to make sure if this bill were to pass and we do a study, will this study in the end be able to show that if things are provided to libraries, and what we are asking as recommendations, will the citizens and residents of Vermont be more informed and educated as a people by way of library services? Now, the bill can't exactly answer that, and I think you kind of understand why, but the bill might be able to show that there is a certain level of baseline services that libraries are able to provide their communities. It might not, however, be able to show there is a baseline level of services statewide, no matter what. And that's what we're seeking to see. What are the baselines across all libraries? Where are there potential gaps? How can those gaps be addressed? And what does that look like? But you have to do a study first to begin to discuss that. Any questions? Jeanette, go ahead.
Yeah, Jason, Carolyn Brennan, Kellogg Hubbard had a question. Wouldn't it be difficult to position libraries as this type of hub if they aren't municipal entities?
No, Vermont has shown me everything can be done differently. That's going to depend on your library board and conversations. That does not mean that you have to be a municipal library. You would probably want to then, guess what, have a contractual thing called a memorandum of understanding or an MOA. And those are items that would be binding on the relationship you would wish to have. I can definitely see why you would say, well, if the town wanted to do that, wouldn't they? Not exactly. It all is, how do we want to be in agreement with being an informational hub if there's a technology rollout where they say, where are locations that need to be up and running in a time of crisis, no matter what? Of course, people would say the town office, but in some cases, guess what? Some of our libraries are larger than the town office. So it's going to make sense in some cases that people, when they really think about what is best suited in their cases for broadband, who is best to be the main connector of this in our town? It doesn't mean they're the only. In other states, there are a variety of locations where the library is included almost as a backup should something happen to the main central office of a town. It doesn't mean the offices come into the library to run that, but what it does mean is by extension, they can say, okay, for our citizens, you might want to go to your library to fill out your FEMA application. Right now, no one, for example, in Texas can do this because they have the entire grid down, but think of it that way. In emergency services, where do you want to go or shepherd people who might not have access? What is up and running and what does that look like? Just throwing those types of thoughts out. Any other questions before I quickly move on to the federal?
Yes, so Miranda has a question related to that, and then we have other questions as well. So Miranda's question specific to that is, let me see, if libraries would be these hubs, would there be funding for such things as backup generators, et cetera, for libraries?
That would definitely be needed. And this is part of the study question because we do have emergency management within this. This is such a fast and evolving item because broadband, in another way, is also being connected to some federal legislation. It might be standalone or it might be tied into that topic. So Miranda, I'll come back to your question on some federal legislation, but yes, if you're going to move forward with that type of thought, and I say if, I'm discussing it in the lens of there is a lot of conversations in the state, but this is really conversations on a federal level about some money that they might want to do something with that allows broadband services to be connected to emergency services, which would allow for things like HVAC systems, ventilation, complete renovations, and of course, backup systems for entities that take on this challenge. But that's connected more to the federal discussion with the state saying, let's wait and see what happens with extra money that might be coming. Because if that's going to be the case, it rethinks everything that we want to do coming out. And I'll get to that in a moment. Next question.
Yep, another one related, and then so I'll give you both sort of questions that are out there right now. So one is Almi asking, what about towns with no libraries? Those residents would use wherever is nearby. What if nearby libraries require fees? And then there are two questions about standards and whether the working group's purview is to propose minimum standards or library standards. So that there are two questions there.
All right, great question. I'll take Almi's question. Given Vermont's history of local control, that is going to be more in the local purview of how they would like to operate in conducting themselves for services for persons who are not residents of that community. So that will be left up to them. The State Library at this moment has no thoughts. We'd be neutral, but we would be open to what people would like to do if they want to talk about shared services for people who are not residents. That would be something, again, decided by your own director and the library board and municipality if agreed upon. And those are things that people can do independent of us, but we might be looked upon to provide information or recommendations or examples, and we'd be happy to do that. For the second item, yes, this bill to me is a precursor and pretty much a requirement, in my opinion, before we launch on doing the heavy lifting as a state, which will be to not update the Vermont library standards and the law of libraries, but to completely overhaul them. Some people say, oh, that sounds drastic. The reason why you would need an overhaul is because some of these standards are over 50 years old. That's simply put, they're just not even considered. We don't even ask some of the questions per law because they are inconsistent. I mean, how many of you would like for me to be asking you about, okay, let's talk about how many of you are still using floppy disks as your central backup storage device, floppy disks from the 1980s. Do you wish to report on that when it's actually obsolete? The format is completely changed. So it requires us to look at what does this go into trying to take it fully or piece by piece. And the only way you can even attempt to do standards is to first understand, what does the landscape even look like? What are the gaps? There should be no attempts to change any standards, even though they're old, until you know exactly what the foundation is. And this study is an attempt to examine, what are we doing as a state with libraries? This is also not just about public libraries per se. This is also a little of the interplay between public libraries and school libraries, and academic libraries and public libraries. So there's going to be a lot of things, but the last piece being how the department itself interacts with the public libraries on a variety of these topics. And yes, Almi, I'm a fan also of not having a mandate. Of course, I can't give you a mandate, but the legislature can give you a mandate. The Department of Libraries cannot mandate you do anything, but the state sometimes does, and that's what you would want to avoid. So your comment is deeply appreciated. I too would hate for somebody to take, let's say, this study and force us all to do something without additional state funding. That would be almost a tragedy, because it would be really problematic. Jeanette?
Yep, and Jeanette asked, will there be money for expanding staffing and part-time? So I want to just remind folks that this is just a study at this point, and those are details that may come out of what is seen in the study, but I think that's a little bit in the weeds at this point. So,
Correct.
and remember, the bill has not yet passed. So Jason, I think you could probably go ahead. I think we're all caught up.
All right, perfect, thank you. So going back to Miranda's question, one of the things that we can now, before I get to that, let me just give you some information on how to follow items, because I did have a piece in here about the other bills. What's very helpful for everyone to be aware of as a taxpayer, resident, Vermonter in the state, is to ensure that you at least know what is being discussed in your own legislature. So what I've done is put the link in to where you will see, you will have to be very, very careful. When you load the page, sometimes it will shift to the prior legislative session. When you're on the page, if you click the link, you want to make sure that you are in the current session, which will be the biennium, so 2021, 2022. It will give you the link proposed here, shows you all of the House bills that are being proposed in a variety of ways that assist you in understanding how it impacts your life personally, professionally, and also politically if you have different types of viewpoints. The House bills, there are a few things that can be considered, but these to me are a little bit more personal and community-based. What is also unique to know is going to examine the Senate bills. This is where I'm going to pull out a few that you might be interested in just knowing they are being discussed. Again, we will not know if any of the House or bills pass, but coming as we go into March, we're about to have what is called crossover. So bills that were able to make it out of committee will then start being shifted between the House and the Senate to be taken up and discussed, and then we will see at the end which ones made it. The bills that you want to keep an eye on, at least in the Senate, that libraries should think about will be S17. S17 is an act relating to the requirement to pass a civics course for all high school graduation. That means we need to think about how libraries can play in civic engagement. And that is not saying buy textbooks. What that is saying is, do people even understand, guess what, the three branches of government? Do you understand how local government works in Vermont? So we're going back to things that some of us have not had since elementary school, which I think is really wonderful. But it again says, maybe libraries want to start talking about, let's talk about civics. Do you even understand government, how this all works? It's a wonderful thing. I'm just not going to put all those links in, but I'll just call it the numbers. S26 is our bill. And again, you can shift on that link that I sent between the House and the Senate to see them. S75 is a unique one. This is a bill that is going to be discussing dyslexia and services for those persons there. That also will impact libraries in a way, because you do have constituents that are dyslexic, and you might want to think about special services. We, of course, have the Able Library, so we'd be able to assist you in a variety of ways, but it's just to acknowledge that we're having lots of informational conversations in the legislature about things that impact people in a variety of ways. Now, with the bill with S75 is an act for screening for how many people have dyslexia, but that means we actually don't know right now in the state of Vermont how many people officially. So we will see what that looks like, but consider it something to just keep in the back of your mind. S60 is a very unique bill. With S60 is an act allowing, and this is the administrative side of your library and your connection to your municipality, even if you're not a municipal library. An act relating to allowing municipal and cooperative utilities to offer innovative rates and services. It could go up, it could go down, but this is all about how you're going to consider how much are we paying for electricity. I assume Vermont does not want to be like Texas right now, even though Vermont knows what snow looks like. So just know utilities are a big thing, and bill surcharges are quite unique when you really unpack them. So there are conversations about that. You have S54. S54 is an act relating to the imposition, guess what, of sales tax on candy to fund childcare assistance. What does that look like? Childcare. So we're talking about early learning and literacy programming in some cases. Know that that is a conversation that is also going on. Again, we don't know if any of these will pass, but for your awareness. S30 will impact you. S30 is an act relating to prohibiting possession of firearms at childcare facilities, hospitals, and certain public buildings. Pay attention to that one. S36 is all funding modifications and use of the coronavirus relief fund. And so that has large implications to a variety of things, not so much for libraries, but just know about vaccination rollouts and a whole host. Those are the ones that I found I think libraries might want to pay attention to because they impact either on a municipal level or even a work-related or building or service level, depending on what those items are. I hope those two links are beneficial to you just to kind of know what the bills are. You can research them at your own time. And we will now transition into the federal. With the federal conversation, what is really amazing, and this is my last point, is what people are discussing. The main national entity that we pay attention to for all of us is the American Library Association. What is occurring between a triangulation, as I call it, with a large amount of national organizations such as the chief officers of state libraries, American Library Association, the Institute Museum of Library Services, they're all discussing a variety of things on what can we do to help libraries and museums. Well, they have introduced an idea, all of them, and I'm a part of what is known as COSLA, to do something that is pretty much unheard of. And if this were to pass, it is considered revolutionary. This has not been done since the last WPA project. It is called the Build America Library Act. The Library Act itself is rather large, if passed by Congress, and it is gently moving forward, believe it or not. It is a part of a large school and academic bill in the federal government where they want to do things like they did in the Great Depression. IMLS is the main funder for us and all state libraries, and as you know, they offer different types of grants. They no longer do construction, but they did up until I think almost 1970. This act would require them to go back into doing that. Now, why is that interesting? If passed in full, or even if passed in any amount financially, the act requires that the minimum financial amount of money that would be given to a state library, because it would only come to state libraries, to dole out by way of grants would be $10 million for construction, renovation, broadband, COVID mitigation, and a host of other things. We are among a variety of states that do not have a construction grant program. As a state, we've never had one, but our surrounding neighbors do. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, and a host of others. And I have worked with some. Tom also has built libraries. I have as well in the state of Georgia. And so there are things that we are gently looking at. This is a do nothing right now because we don't even know if it's going to pass. But what we do know is that we are told you should at least be thinking as a state library, how would you roll that out if you did get $10 million? Because there's also windows of time. Here's the negative part of this. If this comes out of Congress, we would only have 2, maybe 3 years to expend all that money, which means we would have to work feverishly to immediately do that. So I wanted to update that with you. The link has already been posted, but the parts that I put into the link that shows you how the grants would have to be constructed are quite unique. It goes to emergency management. It talks about removal of lead, mold, mildew. You can hire a consultant to examine should you build or do a renovation. How to be inclusive of people with disabilities, accessibility, improve library services for community-based partnerships for education, workforce, behavioral and mental health services. And then of course you have retrofitting, renovating, modernizing, updating, including all COVID mitigation and natural disasters. So the biggest part that also stands out, investing in library infrastructure projects to improve internet connection, access, and connectivity. We could do this, but at the same time, the federal government itself has a separate bill in which they might give states money just for broadband in the billions. So this would be a two-pronged approach that we would have to take with the state, in addition to we would have our own pot of money and the state would have its own pot of money. Of course, I would like to have more money. So I'm going to, of course, try to connect with the state to see how much more money I can get on top of any money that I get from IMLS. So this is to let you know what is going on nationally and how things are quickly changing. You might ask, well, what can we do to make this happen? Just know that your congressional leaders, I have spoken with them, Senator Leahy's office and Senator Leahy himself. He is the vice chair of the Senate Appropriations, and Senator Sanders' office. Senator Sanders has already promoted this and signed on. Senator Leahy is awaiting to see if it will come to committee, and then we will see if it leaves the Senate and goes to the House, which it would have overwhelming support. So this is just to let you know where things stand federally. So at this moment, it's just for your awareness. It's a do nothing. It's a, ooh, I'm a little bit excited, but it's really, let's wait and see if it actually comes into fruition. If you have any questions, contact me. I'd be happy to discuss it further. But I hope it gives you some encouragement during this time that things could be swift once Congress ends its session coming up very soon, for us to know if we're going to need to work overtime, basically, to make a lot of things happen in the library community. Keep in mind, if this passes and the library bill passes, the department will be set easily for the next 4 years on work that it has to do. And we will still maintain our level of services to you. Thank you for hearing me out. If you have any questions, I look forward to hearing them. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thanks, Jason. Remember to post your questions for Jason. He's going to stick around to the Q&A at the end as well. So our colleagues in information access, who wants to give us an update from you all?
I'm going to hop in quick if that's all right with you, Jeanette. First off, I wanted to thank and congratulate everybody who was a part of the Vermont Community Foundation grants that started in December and are going right now. 98 libraries have received or will be receiving $1,500 each to help support computer and internet access for their patrons. And we're so glad that the Community Foundation was interested in working with us on this, and we're glad that all of you were willing to apply for it. So we're excited about that. Secondly, for libraries who were not eligible for the program and other libraries, we're going to do a similar but much smaller grant program using CARES funds. It's going to be 33 libraries, and it's going to be $400 each, which is going to use up the rest of our CARES funding. So that's coming up probably beginning of March, so keep an eye out. Let's see. We're prioritizing libraries who were not eligible for the last grant, and that was libraries who were not in CUD districts. Next after that are people who did not receive the last grant, people who did not apply for it. And then failing that, it's anybody else. But yeah, more information will be coming about that pretty soon, but it's the same sort of structure. It's for supporting computer and internet access for your patrons. And you'll see more soon. And that is it for me. April, would you like to jump in?
Yes, I mostly just have a few reminders. You may have seen the chatter on the listservs about the Clover URLs. Please make sure you've updated your Clover URLs, any book bookmarks, anywhere that it might be linked in your website to the new URL. And if you aren't sure what that is, send me an email and I will send you the new URL. I also have a reminder about the courier orientation and refresher meeting. I sent that out on the courier listserv. It's meant as just an update for anyone who joined in October or has had staff turnover and wants a refresher about everything relating to the courier. And that is next Friday at 1. And I am going to send out a reminder on the courier listserv for that as well. And then my last one is a reminder for the Interlibrary Loan Roundtable. We just had a meeting and our next meeting is in May. And I send that out to pretty much every listserv. So you'll see that coming up as well. And that's it for me.
Thanks, April. So now the library advancement team, let's go Joy, Jonathan, and Lara. Go for it, Joy.
Okay, so just really quickly, a couple of reminders of grants that are out there in the National Library world. The ARSL Outstanding in Their Field Leadership Institute is still accepting applications, so that's leadership training, 18 months long, that they're going to offer to 30 librarians from small libraries. The deadline for that is February 24th. And then also the ALA Libraries Transform Communities is in round 2 right now. 15 libraries from Vermont got funded in round 1, so congratulations again to all of you. The deadline for the second round is March 4th, so just wanted to remind everyone of that. VTLIB will also be sending people to ALA Annual, which is going to be virtual this year. It's June 23rd through 29th, and we'll have an application out for that fairly soon because registration opens March 1st, and there'll be funding for 1 academic, 2 school librarians, and 4 public librarians. I just want to say people have had pretty good experiences with these virtual conferences from ALA, so consider applying for that. Just wanted to remind people that we do have Niche Academy now, which is an online platform of CE. So we're still working on the site, always adding things to it and organizing it. But we've begun using it for our core courses, which is, I think, helpful for scheduling and being able to share a lot of content with people not having to travel. So that's working well so far. And then just a few upcoming things that we're planning for CE. There's a cohort of 3 VTLIB staff and 2 public librarians that are doing PLA EDI training right now, and we're hoping to bring back information from that and share in at least a few webinars here for the Vermont librarians. And then we are also working on emergency management training with Vermont Historical Records Program and the Vermont Arts and Cultural Disaster Resilience Network. So stay tuned for the dates on all of that. And of course, always look at the website because we're adding things constantly. So thanks.
Hi, this is Jonathan Clark, Youth Services Consultant. You know, I hope that you're feeling summer today because it's coming. So I just have a couple like summer reading related updates. The grant, summer grant applications, I'm gonna pop it in here real quick. The grants are now open for the $200 for summer programming. We have made changes to that, so it is not just to get a performer, but you can use to purchase items to support summer programming. So we encourage all of you to apply for that grant. The applications are due March 14th, so there's all sorts of information on that page that I linked there. And if you need help with anything, please reach out to me and let me know. And then we have our summer reading workshops coming up. I will put the information in the chat about that as well. They're going to be March 10th and 11th. And so we encourage staff to attend those as well. They are primarily focused on youth services, but they could be helpful for any staff as well. So please join us. That's it.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And this is Lara Keenan. Those of you, hopefully you all know me. I'm the Governance and Management Consultant. I have a few really quick updates. All of our updates are pretty quick this morning. We had a meetup last week about communicating with folks coming up to town meeting. So as you know, it's just in a week and a half now. If you have any questions or want any suggestions, please feel free to reach out to me. I can share with you some of the things that were said during that meetup and some other suggestions if you'd like any of that. But continue to keep those communications up. As you know, I'm big on communicating with stakeholders, so please continue to do that. A couple years ago, we started pairing up with the Vermont Library Association to offer the Trustees and Friends Conference in the spring alongside the Vermont Library Association Conference. This past year, with COVID and everything being up in the air, we ended up offering our Trustees and Friends Conference in the fall, which ended up being a great time to offer it. We had great success at that conference. So this year in May, when the Vermont Library Association Conference happens, we're going to have a quick touch base with trustees and friends that we're going to try to integrate in with the Library Association's conference. More information about that will be coming up soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And the last thing that I wanted to update you on is since June, Josh and I have been working with a group of librarians, library workers, trustees from around the state to develop a set of listserv etiquette guidelines and best practices. This was based off when the VSLA released a series of best practice guidelines to help make their listserv as effective as possible for users, and that inspired us to want to do the same for the VTLIB run listservs. So we've developed a very short list of those best practice guidelines, and we will be releasing those on the listservs shortly. So keep your eyes open for that as well. And that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. And I just realized that I never introduced myself. Jeanette Schaeffer, I'm the Assistant State Librarian for Library Advancement. So sorry about that. I also wanted to welcome Bruce Post, who is the chair of the Vermont State Library Board. Sorry, Bruce. Welcome to this meeting.
Hello.
And hi. So my updates are really brief as well. Please, in the meantime, go ahead and post your questions in the chat. So we got some really great news from NLS this week, the National Library Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired. I think that's the name. They changed it recently. Anyway, they're the ones that the Able Library is attached to, and they have told us this week that now educators, so anybody who works with students, librarians, teachers, speech therapists, anybody can certify a reading disability so that we can provide services to those people as well. So it used to have to be a doctor of medicine, which was kind of a hassle, and a lot of people wouldn't go and get certification, and now that's wide open. So please, if you know of anybody with a reading disability, you are able to certify for services. So let us know if you have questions. And Jason, you wanted to chime in?
Yes, that is so wonderful, again, that everybody should know. If you would like to ask us questions of how to have a conversation with people, because you are going to also be able to do that. You know in your community who might be having a vision impairment problem that limits them from reading. But sometimes we all know our emotions and feelings get in the way of saying, how do I approach somebody to say, I don't believe you know how to read this book because of your eyesight. So just know that there are ways to approach the conversation in a tactful way to let somebody know that they do qualify to have access to resources, and it should not be something that is considered shameful or illiterate. It's a physical item that we all age. As I look on the screen, a lot of us who have eyewear, guess what? We also qualify for the service automatic. So just know it can either be temporary, like for pregnancies, surgeries, physical movement that is also temporary, or injury. But again, I've found a lot of people say, I just don't know how to approach somebody in a nice way of saying, I think you need this service. We are also here to help you with that.
Yeah, and stroke as well. We have a lot of folks who are temporarily using our services because they're in therapy for strokes. So if you have questions, contact our Able team or me. We're really excited about that. Is there a press release that we could share with the educators we work with? There is not, Marie, but I will send you an an update about that. That was an internal bulletin, which I think it will be public, but it wasn't a press release per se. I will send that to you. The other thing is this is the 4th week of our sampling for how much you are helping people sign up for the vaccine. And I will send out that link again today in the update. If you've filled that survey out, we really appreciate it. We're trying to gauge how much libraries are helping folks sign up for vaccines and if there are any problems. So if you haven't already filled it out, it takes a few minutes to do, and we really appreciate the information to possibly carry on to our colleagues in the Department of Health. So are there any other questions? We have 10 minutes for questions. You can raise your hand, you can turn on your mic and ask using voice. If you're calling in, you can use *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, pretty quiet out there. I know it was a lot of information, and feel free to contact us if
Tom.
you. Yeah,
Tom has something.
I have a question. How's everybody doing out there? Hanging in there? Getting through the winter. It's been a year of quarantine almost. How you feeling?
Well, there's a loaded question, Tom, if I've ever heard one.
Feel free to put that in the chat, or if you'd like to let us know. We do care about how all of you are interacting, and we hope that the work that we are doing and continue to do is of service to you, and that you are benefiting from the opportunities that we work to promote, along with just what's going on in the state. There's a lot of change, and our role right now is to help you navigate that, because if things come into fruition, it's almost going to be like a financial flood of having to navigate things quickly. And our role is to assist you on partaking in those opportunities should they arise. But tell us how you are. I can tell you personally, starting from myself, doing well. You know, I've gained weight and I eat cake at night just to kind of get through the thing. Oh, this is not group, I'm sorry. But overall, I'm fine. And I am enjoying what I do and enjoying all of you, and hope that you are just having a really good life right now and taking it in stride.
Yeah, and Paula is excited about lots of Zoom programming. That's really exciting. We're always happy to see what you're doing. VLA, by the way, is working on, we had asked them whether they could make their calendar available for posting events so that everybody gets to enjoy. Now that we're on Zoom, you know, why wouldn't we be able to hop onto a Greensboro Zoom event coming, you know, from Barrie. So we've approached VLA to see if they could let folks put their events on their calendar, and they were gracious enough to look into how that could work. So hopefully we'll hear from them. And I don't know if there's anybody in the room who could speak to that from VLA. Oh, you had a person from Scotland. Yes. Speaking of Scotland, we have our Memorable Times Cafe that the Central Vermont Council on Aging hosts once a month, and that has gone Zoom as well. So if you know anybody with memory issues who would like to hop onto that, we've had a lot of success with getting people into that, and we're supporting it. We're not actually hosting it. But yeah, it's wide open now to everybody in Vermont, which is just wonderful. We had 40 people coming in from Scotland. We had a partnership with them last week, so that was great. Someone from Japan. Wow. Okay. Plans for VLA annual conference, virtual or otherwise? Anybody in the room that wants to speak to that from VLA? Laura, do you want to hop in?
Sure.
Let us know.
Yeah, I think Marie just put in the chat that VLA is planning some virtual version of a conference. Yeah, they are going to have a planning meeting soon, and I've asked to join the planning meeting just to see how I can be helpful and how VTLIB can be helpful. But also, as I mentioned earlier, because I want to align the sort of trustees and friends touch base with what VLA is already planning. So according to Kevin, who I spoke to a couple weeks ago, they are planning to have, they're thinking maybe a week-long conference similar to what we at VTLIB did for the trustees and friends conference, sometime in May being a virtual conference. So that's what we know at this point, but I'm sure that more information will come out shortly.
Yep. Thank you. And Bree had a question that is really important to understand about ABLE. So she asks, many things mentioned were physical, eyesight, stroke, etc. Is this now also reading challenges like dyslexia, processing issues? Yes, it always has been. It's just the certification that has been opened up and made it more accessible. But yes, dyslexia, definitely. We have such a wide variety of audiobooks, talking books they're called, that are accessible through an app on your phone. So for young folks who are probably more apt to use the phone rather than the actual reader that we use, there's so many possibilities and such a rich variety of books for all ages as well that are available for the app. So yes, please send them our way.
Jeanette, can I chime in on something?
Yeah, sure.
On that question, I haven't sent it forward, but it will probably come up in our digest. So the Virginia State Library let me know that the Virginia Beach Public Library will be hosting something that is accessible to everyone. And if you've never been to this in person, it's kind of fascinating, but they're going to do it virtually. But the state of Virginia will be hosting a WebEx on virtual resource showcases for the blind and visually impaired, and it will be free. So if you're interested in attending that, that will be put into our digest to show you how to register for the link, but it is totally free. It will be on March the 10th from 1 to 4:30, but that came into me yesterday from the Virginia State Library. And you will start to see us by way of Joy or Jeanette start to probably begin having a few additional state libraries promoting services now that we are virtual that everyone can attend. It will be quite unique. I will say on our end here is something that the state libraries are about to ask a question on, but it means we will all need to connect with our state association, which will be our state associations, if they're doing things virtually, open to letting other participants of other states come in a small number to be a part of their conference, not as a presenter, but just to attend. There is a big interest in people saying, well, what's the challenge of that? If we had money and could travel, we would go, but since we're doing it virtually, what are the options if people are interested in saying, actually, I want to see what's going on in California. Let's go to the Florida one. Let's go to Texas. There are so many questions because virtual access has allowed more people to access things. So I know on my level, we will be having this conversation next week in Kosala, and then I will connect with the leadership of VLA to see what their thoughts are on this, because it would be almost a two-way street if people are going to say, hey, can we attend each other conferences just to see what it is this year? Just throwing that out there for awareness.
Yep, that's helpful. We had a question from Carolyn. As a state or in the VLA, are we having conversations around state level funding and or reorganizing libraries into county-wide system models like they use in neighboring states? There was a big push for this 15 years ago or so. I think, Carolyn, the study will kind of lay the groundwork for any such conversations. And Jason, I don't know if you want to give more information on that.
That is agreed. There are a lot of people in a variety of viewpoints across the state who are asking, what does this bill mean for down the road? My first impetus is really the library standards and statutes, but the bill does require us to look at a variety of things such as funding models. I wouldn't say county systems, that's a too big of a push. Vermont has very big local control, but it can mean there might be other models in which libraries form their own library systems in a very different way as opposed to a county model. And so there are a lot of things that will be researched. We will just say what the research is, and then we will say, here are the models. It will not necessarily be the stance of the Department of Library to say, this is what libraries should do. That will not be our place because this bill will be reviewed by the legislature itself, and those recommendations must be taken up by them. but it does allow people to see the landscape and the possibilities from funding libraries and what is known as state aid, all the way to don't do that, but do it some way differently. So we look forward to seeing if the bill can first pass, but it's a wonderful question to think about. And no one should be hopefully terrified or scared. This is about what type of services do we want to have across the board for all of our communities when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equity, which impacts all our lives in a variety of ways. So we do want to look at how are we doing as a library state in itself to see, are we doing what we can to make sure Vermonters have access to our services?
Thanks, Jason. So we're at time, so if you need to hop off, we won't be offended if you do. There is a question from Margaret. They would like to update their accessibility online and in the physical space. Margaret, I just posted a link to a brand new page I just created in the Able Library with partner organizations. Those are good places to start. I know quite a bit of accessibility things for websites just from my past work with other institutions. So you can always reach out to me and I can connect you with those resources. And then there was, oh yes, the building grant that might come from the feds is very heavily focused on ADA upgrades, physical ADA upgrades. So hopefully if that gets passed, there might be some possibility to add ramps, accessible bathrooms, all of those things. So, so if there are any other questions, Margaret's comment, someone who could go around and do accessibility audits for libraries would be a great resource for us. That's a really good suggestion, Marie, and something for us to talk about for sure. Thank you. I like that idea, especially if we do get all this building money. That would be really interesting to do. So any other questions? Jason, I don't think we should.
Hey, we find the
Carrot.
library. Well, I love that libraries are considering removing fees. But yes, accessibility audits are actually quite serious. And yes, there are libraries that would be considered out of compliance, not to mention a variety of things in our state. But we are taking a very unique approach with that, because I do see if funding comes for building construction, a lot of libraries will probably be requesting how to physically allow more access to their building and what does that look like. And in some cases, it means the funds can be used to hire a consultant to examine it. Other people know exactly what they want and just want to go ahead and do it. So there are lots of options if that bill were to pass federally for construction. So there's many things that we are looking forward to doing, but we know a lot of it will be accessibility for our libraries in general.
Yep, thank you. Oh, I also wanted to, Miranda just reminded me, so Joy mentioned that 2 public librarians are in the EDI, the PLA EDI workshop, and Miranda is one of them. And then we also have Bridget.
Jeanette, it's Mariah, not Miranda.
Mariah. Thank you. Yes,
Mariah
thank
Lawrence.
you for correcting that. Mariah, sorry, Miranda. It's Mariah and Bridget are in that course, and we're so excited that you're there. I've already seen some really great things come through in the discussions. Money for weatherization is also an issue. Yes, and I think that bill would also include some of those upgrades as well. Thanks, Mariah.
Ooh, okay. I can add on that. One last thing on what Jeanette said. Weatherization, our money, if that money comes from IMLS for us, yes, it would be a direct connection, but you should know part of the federal additional stimulus would have its own separate money for weatherization as well. So not saying that you would play in 2 sandboxes, but if you aren't qualified for one, which ours you would probably be for, you can also qualify for the other, because that is considered a shovel ready and getting people back to work style project. The big thing coming out of the federal government now is infrastructure on all calibers, and that's what we're paying attention to.
Yep, that is right. And lots of other grants out there as well, if you can't wait for that bill to pass too. Exterior painting, well, let's get there when we get there, Jeanette, on whether exterior paint is part of it. Okay, looks like we're winding down. You know where to find us. If you have questions, if you think of things that you wish you had asked, please ask after this is over. And we will be in touch with more updates as they come along. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you, team, for being here to answer questions. And we hope you have a great weekend and enjoy the upcoming warmer temps. Bye, everybody.